in some various reports. That is the best I can tell you as to what they were exactly.
So not sure whose witness statements that you might have reviewed?
Again, I would have to go through the documents to get the names of them and the exact details. I just don't have that off the top of my head.
Did you review police reports in this case?
Again, I do not recall the exact names of the documents, so I just cannot answer that question. It was a long summary of information.
And I'm just trying to be clear. So when you say it was a long summary of information, was it something that Mr. Pineau summarized for you?
They pulled the documents together for me. I believe there are thousands of pages of discovery in this case, and it would be a major adventure for me to sort through them all myself. So it's pretty common to be supplied things relevant to the specific opinion that I'm being asked to render, in this case related to memory loss.
And the information that you were provided with was provided by the defense?
Yes.
Did you review text messages?
I do not recall. I actually do think some of them looked like text messages, like the image, but I don't have the document names.
Okay. Did you write an expert opinion letter in this case?
I did not.
You did not write an expert opinion letter?
I wasn't asked to.
So you are a very experienced expert.
Yes.
And you recognize that providing your opinion in advance is actually required by law.
Objection, Your Honor. Permission to approach.
You may. Was there a different kind of summary of her testimony provided?
Right. We provided under Rule 16 a summary of her testimony and her everything else and her CV and all that. The summary is required. Opinion can be is also another way to go, but we provided a summary and it's quite lengthy. So there's no law that requires that she write an opinion.
Your Honor, there is a requirement that the opinion summary is certainly provided to the people, and it is perfectly valid for me to cross-examine the fact that her own opinion letter was not actually authored by her in this particular case.
That's not what I'm objecting to. I'm objecting to her saying the misstatement of the law, which is that the law requires you to write an opinion. That needs to be retracted.
So if you would just clarify that a summary of her opinion was provided.
That's fine, yeah. So a summary of your opinions was provided in this case.
That is my understanding, yes.
But it is not a summary that you actually wrote.
Yes, which is relatively common.
So the opinion summary in this particular case was written by the side that is paying you.
The side that requested my opinion is almost always provides a summary of what they expect to ask me and my expected then responses as I understand it.
I'd like to talk a little bit about your experience testifying in sexual assault cases specifically. So prior to 2019, and you mentioned this on direct examination, you conducted the majority of toxicology, sort of blood alcohol content testing for law enforcement in the state.
Blood alcohol, urine, drug, and postmortem, and most of the law enforcement cases, yes.
Now, the majority of those cases were driving under the influence, driving while ability impaired cases.
Yes.
And you specialize in impairment relating to the ability to operate a motor vehicle.
No, I specialize in the impairment on the human body and the ability to function with an emphasis on driving because of the number of cases I get.
Have you updated your LinkedIn profile recently?
I don't even think I know my LinkedIn login.
That answers that. Would you be surprised to hear that your LinkedIn profile specifically says that you do specialize in impairment relating to the ability to operate a motor vehicle?
Oh, I do specialize in that. It's just not the only aspect of it that I specialize in.
Of course. And so most of the cases in which you have testified in have been driving under the influence cases.
Yes, I'm sure they have been.
You testified on direct examination about a training for the Denver Police Department relating to alcohol-facilitated sexual assault, correct?
Yes.
When did that training occur?
I do not recall the exact date. It was before the lab closed, so before 2019.
If I gave you a copy of your CV, would you be able to point out that specific training?
Maybe.
Well, would you believe me when it says that there is no mention of a presentation on specifically alcohol-facilitated sexual assaults in the resume provided to me?
I don't know what you have in front of you, and I know that particular one was an invite to a meeting versus like a continuing education presentation. So it was not quite the same thing.
Okay. So you do have a very detailed resume in this case.
I attempt to write down all of the teaching for continuing education I do so that the continuing education credit people can verify it, yes.
Makes sense. It's 13 pages.
Sure.
And you document both your trainings, presentations, as well as your continuing education classes.
I document training and conversations that are being used for continuing education, yes.
Okay. So none of the presentations specifically mention sexual assault.
Yes, I do not think I've done a specifically continuing legal education talk on it, just a general information talk for agencies.
And none of the continuing legal education classes specifically were trainings regarding sexual assault.
No, it's normally just part of my larger training.
The majority focuses on driving while ability impaired, driving under the influence, sort of effect of drugs on that nature of things, right?
Yes, and like I said, death cases similar.
Sure. So in the 13 pages of your resume, there's one mention of your testifying in sexual assault cases.
Okay.
Which was added in 2019, correct?
No idea.
Well, it's your resume, right?
Yes, and as mentioned, it's 13 pages. I definitely don't have it memorized.
So it's fair to say that driving under the influence cases are different than sexual assault cases in sort of a variety of ways.
Yes, in particular the driving part.
Absolutely. So in driving under the influence cases, for example, there's a law called express consent that actually requires people to have a blood or a breath test conducted when there's probable cause that they were driving under the influence.
That is outside of my portion of the case, but yes, that is my understanding.
Which often results, or can more often result in a blood alcohol content or a blood test kit or a breath test kit, right?
There's no breath test kit, but a breath test result or a blood test, yes.
Another difference is that oftentimes the observations of intoxication are coming from police officers investigating the driving under the influence case.
Yes.
Which means that the police officers are trained to recognize indicia of intoxication?
Generally, yes.
And law enforcement officers, while investigating a DUI, are presumably sober themselves?
I really hope so, yes.
Certainly, me too. And they conduct roadside standard field sobriety tests?
In some cases, they are voluntary.
And sometimes they ask for a preliminary breath test?
Sometimes, yes.
Now, in a sexual assault case, there is no such equivalent of express consent.
Correct.
So oftentimes we don't have blood alcohol content or concentration test results.
Correct. It's more often to get urine samples, if you get a sample at all in a sex assault case.
And certainly no requirement for that because it's not like a DUI case.
Right.
So you mentioned that you reviewed some reports or summaries of how much alcohol was consumed during this particular incident.
I was focused more on the memory, but yes, there was discussion of consumption of alcohol. I didn't see like a list of exactly what was consumed anywhere.
Okay, so based on the reports of that, you're aware that there is no list of exactly what anyone consumed.
Right, that's my understanding.
And reports of alcohol consumption are mostly coming from sort of friends and associates of Mr. Shavers as well as Ms. Paquins.
Yes, I do recall that there was like a mention, like I was drunk, so maybe I don't remember. So I know there was admission of drinking by the individuals, but there's also additional discussion.
Sure. And there's also individuals who specifically comment about sort of the level of intoxication of just the group in general.
Right.
And so the reports about intoxication and how much alcohol is being consumed is coming from